Hmm. Well, good afternoon. उसको खत्म कर दिया उसको। अच्छा, दोपहर में बंद मत किया करो, शाम में बंद कर देना। Well, well, before the break, we were talking about the emotional intelligence. There we had seen, again, the previous slides have been removed. So let us see. The first emotional intelligence was, 5 emotional intelligences are there. First was self-awareness that we have seen. Second was self-regulation that we have seen. Third was motivation that we had seen. Fourth was empathy that we have seen. And the last was social skill or relationship building. These are the 5 emotional intelligences that we had mentioned in this model of emotional intelligence that we will talk about now. Now we were talking about that there are 3 important say features, characteristics of emotional intelligence has been recognized. First was that emotional intelligences are the learned abilities. We learn them from the experiences of our life. So that is the first important thing that we had already talked about. We have seen some implication of that also in our previous class. Now we will talk about the second and the third feature of the emotional intelligence also. Write down further. Second one, they are hierarchical. They are hierarchical. Write down further. They depend on and develop from. They depend on and develop from the previous one. They depend on and develop from the previous one. So that is the second important thing that we have to remember about the emotional intelligence throughout the course. Second one is that these emotional intelligences are hierarchical. The way we have organized the whole system, they are hierarchical in nature. So for example, well, if you look at the first one, a certain level of emotional self-awareness is required in order to self-regulate. So if you are not able to, you are not aware of who we are or what our emotions are, you cannot regulate them. Self-regulation is necessary for motivation. If we cannot control our emotions, then motivation will become impossible in that. If you can't motivate, you can't use your emotion for a purpose. When motivation, if it is not, you don't understand your emotion, control and motivate, then well, empathy will not be possible. You will not be able to understand others' emotion, and if you don't understand others' emotion, you will not be able to change others' emotion as well. So the way we have organized the emotional, we have conceptualized the whole concept that this theory is a hierarchical theory in that case. In a way, we can see we have a sort of hierarchical structure. The base of that hierarchy, okay, pyramidal structure, base of that pyramid is the self-awareness, and the peak of that pyramid is the social skill. And in between, we have the other one, self-regulation, self-regulation, motivation, and empathy. So this leads to that, this leads to that, this leads to that, and this to that. This is how the organization of this structure has been created. We can say emotional intelligences are hierarchical, pyramidal structure, base and the peak and in between the three. That is the second one. Then after we'll talk about third one also. Write down firstly. They depend on the structure of human brain. they depend on the structure of human brain. So that is the next important thing that we have to remember throughout. So emotional intelligence, the way we understand it today, they are dependent on the way our brain is structured. This is one of the basic difference between emotional intelligence and the philosophers' understanding of emotions in the past. Because philosophers in the past, like you can see, so philosophers in the past like Aristotle, Kant or Hume, etc., they all consider emotions as a mysterious thing in our mind, an abstract thing maybe. But in this case, we are going to talk about more biologically rooted aspect of emotion. As you will see in the next class, maybe tomorrow, that emotional intelligence is more biologically oriented in a way. We take biology of the human body as a way to understand, as a reference point to understand that. So, in order to understand emotional intelligence, it's important for us to understand the biology also a little. So, in our class, well, we'll have a little of biology also, a little of, well, we'll try to talk a little about the structure of human brain, the architecture of human nervous system as well. So, that is another important thing that we have to talk about. So, these are the three important characteristics of emotional intelligence. That is something that you need to remember. So, throughout the course, remember these three things. They are learned. First of all, we are not born with that. We can learn it, we can unlearn it, we can increase it, we can decrease it. So, that is always in our control, number one. Secondly, they are hierarchical, one above the other. And thirdly, we often consider brain as an important part of understanding of the emotional intelligence. So, these are the three important things that we need to remember. Now, before we take up the next topic, let us see, I think there is a question. Pin 2, sir, this is just imagination that I am doing. Sir, my question is, can we say that the rational thinking comes from brain, rationality brain, and emotional thinking comes from the heart, emotion is equal to heart? If so, which one perceived higher position? Pin 2, we will talk about that in tomorrow's class. It's emotional thinking does not come from the heart. Emotion thinking also comes, that's why I told you that we'll discuss a little of structure of brain also and emotions in that. People have lots of misconception about the emotion, that emotions come from the heart. We'll talk about this question in more detail in tomorrow's class when we'll talk about the biology, brain and heart and the relationship between the two. Now that is one thing. Now next important topic that we will be talking about, write down further, change the paragraph and then after write further, emotional competence. Emotional competence. Now, when we talk about emotional intelligence, then these are the two important concepts we often talk about. Emotional intelligence, which we discussed earlier, and emotional competence that we are going to mention briefly now. But write down a definition of this emotional competence first of all. Write down. They are emotional competences. They are a set of learned behaviors. Emotional competences, they are a set of learned behaviors which are dependent on, they are a set of learned behaviors which are dependent on certain emotional intelligence and which plays an important role in our success in any profession, and which play an important role in our success in any profession. And which play an important role in our success in any profession. Which play an important role in our success in any profession. So these are the four important things that we have to remember about the emotional intelligence, emotional competence. First of all, they are learned. Remember that like emotional intelligence, it is not something that we are born with. We learn that again on the basis of the experience of our life. Number one. Secondly, these emotional competencies are more like a behavior. There is a difference between ability and behavior. So emotional intelligence is more about our general ability, and this is more about our specific behavior. So what we can do is emotional intelligence, and what we actually do, well, that is emotional competence. It is actual behavior rather than potential abilities. Third thing is that it is emotional intelligence dependent, in the sense that, as we will give you a list of some of them, that each emotional intelligence has its own set of emotional competences. So that is another important thing that we have to remember. And most importantly, well, they have a professional role to play, which means that each profession, for us to be successful in that, requires certain emotional competence. Suppose, for example, you want to be successful, you want to be a successful IAS officer in the administrative service, then you must know the administration, knowledge of administration, etc. But along with that, you must always have certain emotional competences in you. Suppose for example, if you want to be a successful IPS officer, then you need to have some other competence in you. Or if you want to be successful, suppose for example, well, if you want to be a successful IFS officer, foreign service for example, then you will need to have some other competence in you. So the idea here is that each emotional intelligence, or suppose for example, you want to be a successful doctor, if you want to be a successful lawyer, if you want to be a successful, well, politician, a businessman, an entrepreneur, etc., etc., a successful teacher, etc., etc., then you must have some other competence in you in that case. Each emotional intelligence requires, each profession requires certain emotional competence in order to make us successful in that particular job. So that is the importance of emotional competence. Now, I will give you a list of these emotional competences here that will help you to understand what is it that we are going to do in the next few, can say, days and all, a week or so. So you can write it down. It might possibly help you to keep a track of what we are discussing in the future classes, but it will help you to understand the whole concept also. So we had seen the first emotional intelligence was self-awareness. On the basis of self-awareness, three emotional competences have been identified. First one is called emotional awareness. Second is called accurate self-assessment. And the third one is called self-confidence. So these are the three important competences on this topic. So emotional awareness, on the basis of self-awareness, these three competences we have identified in our model of emotional intelligence: emotional awareness, accurate self-assessment, and third one is self-confidence. So that is self-awareness. Second emotional intelligence we have seen was self-regulation. On the basis of self-regulation, 5 emotional competences have been identified. First one is self-control. Second one is called trustworthiness. Third one is called conscientiousness. Fourth one is called adaptability. And the fifth one is called innovation. So on the basis of self-regulation, these are the 5 competences that we have identified in our model. Well, self-control, trustworthiness, conscientiousness, adaptability, and innovation. These are the 5 self-regulation related competences in our model. We will discuss all of that in detail in our later classes, day after tomorrow and the day after and the day after. Then after we have third emotional intelligence, that is called motivation. And on the basis of motivation, we have four emotional competencies that we have identified. First one is called achievement drive. Second is called commitment. Third is called initiative. And fourth is called optimism. So on the basis of motivation, these are the four emotional competencies we have identified: achievement drive, commitment, initiative, and optimism. So this is the motivation. Fourth one is called empathy. On the basis of empathy, five competencies we have identified. First one is called understanding others. Which is also known as simply empathy. Second is called developing others. Third one is called leveraging diversity. Fourth is called service orientation. And the last one is called political awareness. So on the basis of empathy, these are the five emotional competencies that we have identified: understanding others or empathy, developing others, leveraging diversity, service orientation, and political awareness. So empathy based five competences are there. And finally, fifth one is social skill. So there are number of social skills have been identified in this model. First one is called influence. Second one is called communication. Third one is called conflict management. Fourth one is called leadership. Fifth one is called change catalyst. Sixth one is called building bond. Sometimes we also call that as networking. Seventh one is called collaboration and cooperation. And the last one, eighth one, is called team capabilities. So these are the 8 competences that is based on the source. These are the 8 social skills that we talk about. I repeat: influence, communication, conflict management, leadership, change catalyst, building bond or networking, collaboration and cooperation, and finally team capabilities. So these are the 8 social skills that is important for us. So overall, if you look at it, there are 25 emotional competences are there in this model of emotional intelligence. I repeat all of them once again, you can revise that. Self-awareness, there are 3 competences on that: emotional awareness, accurate self-assessment, and self-confidence. On self-regulation, we have 5 emotional competences: self-control, trustworthiness, conscientiousness, adaptability, and innovation. On the basis of motivation, we have 4 emotional competences: achievement drive, commitment, initiative, and optimism. Empathy, there are 5 competences: understanding others or empathy, developing others, leveraging diversity, service orientation, and finally political awareness. And finally, we have 8 social skills are there: influence, communication, conflict management, leadership, change catalyst, building bond or networking, collaboration and cooperation, and finally team capabilities. So overall you see there are 5 in this model that we are discussing in our class. There are 5 emotional intelligences, and based on that there are 25 emotional competences are there, 5 types and 25 subtypes if you wish. So this is this is the whole model of emotional intelligence. We will not discuss all these 25 in our class. The scope of the class does not permit that, but we will discuss most of the important ones that is relevant for our civil service or the UPSC exam. But by the end of this course again, I will expect you people to know all the name 25, and whatever we are going to discuss in our class, you should be very well versed with that. We should be very well aware of that. There can be some direct question on these things also. For example, a few years ago there was a direct question that write a short note on trustworthiness, commitment, optimism, empathy, and service orientation, something like this one. So there are direct question on these things again. So you have to write a short note on that. There can be some indirect question also. There can be some case studies also on all of them. So by the end of the course, you should be aware of these competences very well and should be able to write something on what we are going to discuss in our class next. So this is the scope of our class. This is the total number of, this is the range of things that we are going to discuss in our class next many days now. So that is the idea of emotional intelligence. That is the scope of emotional intelligence, a huge theory in a way. All these 25 are sort of aptitude of civil service as well. We will see that in a later class. Now, next important thing that we are going to talk about is some introductory idea. Again, write down a few lines. Next topic, subtopic. Write down the significance of emotional intelligence, role of emotional intelligence, role of emotional intelligence in the modern role of emotional intelligence in the modern professional life. Role of emotional intelligence in professional life. Role of emotional intelligence in professional life. Now, there can be some question on that also in your exam, that what role does emotional intelligence play in civil service, in bureaucracy, or in professional life of the people, society, etc. So, we will discuss briefly what is the role that emotional intelligence actually plays in our present life, in our modern life. In some detail we will talk about. There are 2 important roles we will talk about here. First one is that, write down, first one, role of emotional intelligence in the professional success of role of emotional intelligence in the professional success of an individual. Role of emotional intelligence in the professional success of an individual. So, what role does play in our life in making us professionally successful, like say in civil service, in bureaucracy? So, let us briefly talk about that. Write down firstly, the professional success of an individual depends on the professional success of an individual depends on 3 factors. Depends on 3 factors. So, what we are going to talk about here, that what are those things that make us professionally successful in our life? Because some people, you know, that they are very successful in their life, and some people, in spite of having everything, they don't succeed that much. What makes people successful in job? Now we find here that if I want to see the success chance, like I say, likelihood of a person in his life, then three important things we have to measure of that person. So three important, if I know three things about you, for example, then I can make a very reliable prediction that how successful you are going to be in your job, in your profession as a civil servant later on. What are these three things that make us professionally successful? Let's talk about these three things. First one is, write down, IQ, intelligence quotient. So let us now briefly talk about the role of IQ and its limitation. What is IQ? Write down a few lines firstly. Again, I am not going into the technical detail of these things, a more simple language, day-to-day language definition. Write down further. IQ measures our ability to learn. IQ measures our ability to learn, comma, to memorize, recall, and manipulate information. IQ measures our ability to learn, to memorize, recall, and manipulate information, comma, to use logic and reason, or our ability to or to use logic and reason, and our ability to do the problem solving, planning, judgment, decision making, etc., etc. IQ measures our ability to learn, to memorize, recall, and manipulate information, to apply logic and reason, or to do problem solving, planning, judgment, decision making, etc., etc. So all of these things combined together is our ability to do all of these things combined together is what we call the IQ. So suppose, for example, there are some people who learn faster than some others. So different students read the same book, some students learn more than others. IQ may be a reason of that. Different students attend the same classroom, some students learn more than the other. IQ may be a reason of that. Similarly, you can say our ability to memorize, recall, and manipulate information. So some people are able to memorize information better, recall that at appropriate time like in an examination hall, or to manipulate that information by applying the rules of logic and reason to arrive at a conclusion. Well, if you are able to do that better, IQ may be a reason of that. Or any of these things, problem solving, planning, judgment, decision making, etc., etc. All of these things combined together is what we call IQ. In a way, we can see that IQ is what we can say here, IQ is the measure of an attempt to measure our rationality. IQ is an attempt to measure our rationality, because as we have seen in the previous class that philosophers in the past have always tried to overemphasize on the role of rationality in the human life, that rationality alone makes us human. And when the psychologists started studying the human nature by scientific method, then they also took up the same assumption that rationality is the most important aspect of human beings. And so when they started studying rationality scientifically, then, well, of course, they started studying rationality scientifically. And whenever you start studying something scientifically, then beginning of scientific study is the measurement. We always try to measure the variable that we try to study, that we want to study. So that is where the scientific knowledge begins, scientific study begins. So that is so they also try to measure, when psychologists they try to study rationality, then they try to measure rationality as well. And this attempt to measure the rationality is something that gave rise to the concept of IQ. So IQ is a number that tells us how much is our rationality in a way. So that is how we can say we define the IQ in general. Now, if you look at IQ, then for the last 100 years, a lot of research has been done in the field of IQ. So a lot of research has been done. In fact, IQ is more than 100 years old now. This concept of IQ, it is said that this concept of IQ was first proposed was in 1916. When there was a psychologist at Stanford University called Terman, he coined this term IQ, intelligence quotient. Though before him also, there was so many attempts to measure the IQ also, something like IQ. People like Binet and Simon had done this, tremendous work in France before that. But they used the other terminology for that, like you can say mental age, chronological age, etc. It was Terman who at Stanford University, he brought up the idea of, you can say, Binet and Simon from France, and he coined the term IQ. So IQ will become a number that is assigned to you, and then after that number can tell you how much rational a person is. And for last so it is 100 years, and for last 100 years or so, you can see a lot of research has been done in the field of IQ. And because of that tremendous amount of research that we have conducted in that field, we have some very accurate method of measurement of IQ in the last 100 years. We have developed that. For example, you can say many other methods are there, like SBIT, for example, Stanford Binet Intelligence Test, which has 5 already versions. SBIT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, perhaps 6 also has come. Or we have Wechsler's intelligence test, Wechsler's adolescent intelligence test, children's intelligence test, and many other tests are also there that we have developed in the past 100 years or so. And because of all these research that we have conducted, today we have very accurate method of measurement of IQ. We can, to a great extent, not 100% of course, no measurement can be 100%, but still we can to a great extent measure your IQ and tell you how intelligent you are, how much rational possibly you are. So that is something that we can definitely measure. Now, you can see that for the last 100 years, these people who have been doing research in the field of IQ, they have found that, they have thought at least, that IQ is the most important thing that makes us successful or fail in our life. So we succeed or fail because of IQ. If somebody's IQ is very high, that person is going to successful. Nobody can stop that person. And if somebody's IQ is low, then this person can never succeed in life. He must settle for something less. He cannot aspire for something bigger in the life. This is what people has thought earlier, that IQ alone determines our, success chance in life. But for the last 30 years or so, more than 30 years, research that we have conducted in the field of emotional intelligence, we have found that this concept of IQ has a big drawback, big problem, big loopholes in a way. So that does not make IQ as powerful as it was thought of. So that was why you can say Daniel Goleman, when he wrote his book, first book on emotional intelligence, then he actually subtitled his book that why does it matter more than IQ? So that was a very important question that we will answer. So why is it that IQ does not matter that much? What is the problem with the concept of IQ? What is drawback in the concept of IQ? Let's talk about that. Try to understand what we are going to talk about. Try to understand the logic that we are trying to develop here. Suppose, for example, I measure the IQ of a large number of people. Suppose 1 million people in any large population, like the IQ of all the people living in, you can say, Delhi, for example, IQ of all these people living in Kolkata, for example. So we take a large number of people, 1 lakh people, 1 million people maybe, and measure their IQ. And if you plot a curve of that IQ, then that curve will be found to be something like this. Something like this one. Now in this curve, the y-axis is the probability and the x-axis is the IQ. So this type of curve is found between the IQ and the probability that a person will have that much IQ. This curve is a very famous curve. All of you must have seen this curve, heard about this curve. What do we call this curve? Well, in common language, you often call it bell-shaped curve. Its shape is like a bell. So, it is a bell-shaped curve, but otherwise we also call it normal distribution curve, probability curve, or if you are a student of mathematics, then we call it Gaussian curve. So, there is a Gaussian equation. If you plot a curve of that Gaussian equation, then well you will get a curve of this shape. So, this is the Gaussian curve also, probability curve also, or normal distribution curve also, bell-shaped curve. Now, what is the meaning and interpretation of that curve? This curve simply means that if you take a large number of people and you plot their curve, then highest probability that the person has certain IQ will always turn out to be 100. The IQ is defined in such a manner that 100 always turns out to be the highest IQ, highest probable IQ. So highest probability that somebody will have an IQ is 100. Idea is that if you randomly pick up a person and if you measure that IQ, the probability is very high that this randomly chosen person will have his or her IQ as 100. That is what is found again. So 100 is often known as the normal IQ, average IQ. So if your IQ is 100, then you are an average person, you are a normal person as far as IQ is concerned. So that is an average IQ in a way. Now suppose for example increase that by 15, slightly higher, make it 115 and decrease that by the similar you can say amount, make it 85. 15 you can say plus, 15 minus. 15 in the literature of IQ is known as the one standard deviation. I hope that you are aware of these mathematical statistical terms, standard deviation, etc. So 15 is known as one standard deviation in the concept of IQ. So if you take one standard deviation plus and one standard deviation minus the normal, then you can say it is normally found that the people whose IQ in that range around 66.66%. So around 2/3 people in the world have their 66.6% people, 2/3 people in the world have their IQ more than 85 but less than 115. So this range of IQ is known as the average range or normal range. So if your IQ is more than 85 but less than 115, then also you are a normal person, you are an average person as far as IQ is concerned. So that is how average IQ is measured. Now the people whose IQ is less than 85, they are called mentally retarded people. Earlier we used to have different name for that, idiots, savants, etc. But today we don't use such words, you can see idiots and savants. Today we use the neutral term like mentally retarded people. But earlier it was called idiots. So idiots are the people, next time when somebody tells you an idiot, you should know what that person actually implies. So idiots are the people who have very low IQ in a way. Dumb people maybe. So earlier we used to call them dumb, idiot or savants and all, but today we are simply using the term, neutral term like mentally retarded people. Now on the other hand, people whose IQ is more than 115, then they are called mentally gifted people. Earlier we had different term for that like genius and many other terms were used for that, but today we simply use the term mentally gifted people. So in terms of IQ now we can see that there can be three types of people: mentally average people, mentally retarded people and mentally, you can say, gifted people. Now let's forget about them. None of you belong to that category, I hope, in my class. So let's not talk about these people. Let's talk about the people who have higher IQ in that case. Now suppose make it 2 standard deviation, make it 130. 2 standard deviation above the normal. Now it is normally seen that the people who have their IQ in this range between 1 standard deviation plus the normal and 2 standard deviation plus the normal, 115 to 130, that around 14% people in the world have their IQ in that range. 14% people. Now let's make it further higher, make it 145, 3 standard deviation above the normal. It is normally seen that around 2% people in the world have their IQ in that range. And if you increase it further, then well, very few people, 0.1%, and after 0.001%. So very few people have their IQ more than that. So that is how you can see IQ has. But theoretically, this curve is asymptotic curve. This curve never touches the baseline. Because of that, theoretically, it is possible that the person can have very high IQ, even 200 IQ. But practically, that is next to impossible to have high IQ higher than 145, 50 or 60 maybe. You know, but there are some people who can randomly have such an IQ. A few years ago, there was a girl in London of Indian origin. That's why we know about, can say that was reported in Indian media also. There was Indian origin girl in London. Her IQ was found to be 165, even higher than the IQ of Albert Einstein. So it is possible that some people can have very high IQ also, like 160, 65, 70 also maybe. Theoretically, but practically that is next to impossible. Maybe one in a billion, one in a trillion can have that IQ. So that is how IQ is distributed. Two-thirds people have average IQ, 14% people have more than above average, 2% people very high IQ, then after very rare. We have similar distribution in the negative side also. We have mild retardation, moderate retardation, severe retardation, acute retardation, etc., etc. So we have all of that also. So this is how IQ in a large population is often found to be distributed. Now there is a question from you people. Now you people tell me, all of you must have gone through at least say the 15 years of your educational life. All of you must be a graduate at least. So during these 15 years of your academic life, all of you must have got many feedback about yourself from other people, like marks that you have got in your schools and college, etc. Feedback of your teachers about you, your friends, your colleagues, your can say the seniors, your juniors, your parents, your relatives, etc. That how intelligent you are. And you might have done some self-evaluation also about yourself, that how intelligent you are. On the basis of all of that, on the basis of the feedback of other people about yourself and your self-evaluation of yourself, if you have to make an assessment of yourself, then what would you say? What would be your IQ? Would it be average, or would you be in 14%, 2% or more than that? How much will be your IQ? Think about it and tell me. Now, when I ask this question in my physical classroom, then majority of my students in the classroom, they say that, sir, I will be average. Very few students say that, sir, I may be, well, 14%, and very, very rarely in my class somebody claims that he or she is 2%. Normally it is found that majority of the students say that they are average. What about you people? So think about it and tell me if you can on my, you can say the chat that we have here available. So if you belong to the average students in my class, normal student, then perhaps many of you might say that you would also be in average category. But I can give you an estimate of your IQ, and my estimate will be very, very accurate. But I will give that estimate about you on the basis of one assumption. Think of it how true this assumption is for you. The assumption that, because that is an important assumption. The assumption is that all of you are preparing for the UPSC exam, and this exam is one of the most difficult exam in the country. Now, before you decided to prepare for the UPSC exam, did you make a self-evaluation for yourself? Did you think about yourself that how intelligent you are? Did you think about yourself that can you clear this exam or not? Did you look at the syllabus of UPSC exam? Did you look at the question paper of previous years? Did you talk to some people who succeeded in this exam or did not succeed, other people who prepared? So have you actually made some sort of analysis in the beginning? And if you have made, suppose I assume that you made such analysis, you have done all these things, and then after maybe you might have thought that if I work hard, then I can clear this exam. Did you do that? Did you have this type of, can say, confidence in you? So if you think that if you work hard, then you may possibly clear this UPSC exam. You actually clear, and that is not the point, because that depends on many factors. But if you think that you are very close to that line which you can cross and become a civil servant, then your IQ must be in the 14% range. Your IQ must be in that case, well, between 115 to 125. That might be your IQ. Why so? Because it is normally seen in our research that, well, aspiration of the people have is found to be directly proportional to the IQ of an individual. So higher is the IQ of a person and higher is the aspiration of that person, and your aspiration is not small. You want to be none less than an IAS officer, the most powerful people in the country. Since your aspiration is high, so it might indicate to a great extent that your IQ must be high. Had your IQ been low, then you might possibly be preparing for a simpler exam rather than such a difficult exam. So normally it is seen that higher is the aspiration, normally people have high, or reverse rather, higher is the IQ of a person, more person wants from his life. Lower is the IQ, less people are willing to settle for. That is what is found in most of the research here. So if you have done that proper analysis of yourself, and on the basis of that you have, you can say, decided to prepare with the confidence that you will clear this exam, then your IQ may be, well, in this 14%. And it is a big assumption, remember, because I have seen, my personal experience is there with the students who prepare for the UPSC exam in Delhi. Well, I have found that almost 60-70% people who clear in the UPSC exam, well, they should not clear. They are simply wasting their time and money into this exam. So they should prepare for something else. They might never clear the UPSC exam. Because, well, so that is what. But so if you do not belong, they simply go to Delhi, their parents simply send them to Delhi again, go there and prepare for the exam. The 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they keep on preparing. They take admission in one coaching, second coaching, third coaching, spend their time, and at the end of it they fail, and then after they go back to their home. So they are the people like that. If you are not like that, if you have actually this thing inside you, if you feel that you can clear the UPSC exam, if you work hard, then your IQ must be in 14%, around 115 to 100, not more than that maybe. Because had your IQ been more than that, 14%, then you might not be preparing for UPSC exam, where you would have been, well, you would have aspired to go to Harvard or, well, Oxford, or you can say the Yale perhaps. You might have to you might have liked to become Raghuram Rajan, or the say the Amar Sen maybe. So, or Abhijit Banerjee, or you can say whatever. So that is what you would have been. So your IQ must be in 14% range, around 15 to 125. Now that makes the concept of IQ a problematic concept. What is that problem? Write down further. What is that problem? Before you write, let us talk about the problem. So what can be the problem here? Problem is that most of the people who clear the UPSC, let's take UPSC exam as an example. Most of the people who clear the UPSC exam, all of them are, well, highly intelligent. They all of them are mostly above average in their intelligence. And all of them who clear the UPSC exam, they are equally intelligent. So they are high and equal IQ they all have. Just think of it. Do you think that the person who tops the UPSC exam and the person who is at the bottom of the rank, do you think that the topper is much more intelligent in terms of IQ than the bottom? Of course not. Both of them are more or less equally intelligent. So topper is as intelligent as the person at the bottom. So both of them are equally intelligent. So everybody who clears the UPSC exam, all of them are more or less equally intelligent, high intelligent. Does it mean that both of them will become, all of them will become equally successful in their career also as an IAS officer? Of course not. Some of these people who clear the exam, they become very good officers. Most of them become average officers, and some of them become very bad officers. Remember, even those people who are bad officers, they have also cleared the UPSC exam. They are also very intelligent people. But in spite of being intelligent, they become bad officers. In spite of having very high IQ, they become a failure in their career. Does it not mean that IQ does not determine their success? This is the problem in the concept of IQ according to Daniel Goleman. So write down further. It is found that most of the people who enter into a higher level job, like civil service, have more or less equal and high IQ. Have more or less equal and high IQ. But not all of them are equally successful in their career. But not all of them are equally successful in their career. Thus, IQ does not determine their success. Thus, IQ does not determine their success. So, this is the lacuna, this is the problem in the concept of IQ. IQ does not determine their success. What does it determine? Write down further. IQ only determines that we can enter into a higher level job. We can enter into a higher level job like civil service, by clearing the initial hurdle like entrance exam. But after that, IQ does not play much role. Thus, one more line, IQ is a minimum and necessary condition of success. IQ is a minimum and necessary condition of success, and not the sufficient one. IQ is a minimum and necessary condition of success, but not the sufficient one. Now, this is what we have found in our research here. The idea here is that what does actually IQ determine? What IQ determines is something like this one. Suppose, for example, IQ determines that you can enter into a job like civil service by clearing the initial hurdle like this entrance exam that you are preparing for. But after you clear the exam and start working as an IAS officer, IQ will not play much role in your success. So, it is something like this. Suppose, for example, this is the increasing IQ, and suppose this is the power hierarchy of an organization. Suppose this is the hierarchy of the organization, lowest people, then after second lowest, then after third lowest, and the topmost people. So, people at the lowest organization, second level, third level, fourth level, and topmost one. Now, suppose this is where this organization begins jobbing. Right now, suppose you are here, you are preparing for the exam, you have not yet started the job. So, you might be anywhere on this circle. This is the IQ. This is the IQ. So, you may be anywhere on that case. Now, suppose right now, if your IQ is, it is normally found that people whose IQ is lesser. Well, remember first of all, how many people clear the, how many people appear in the prelims exam every year? Well, around 5 lakh people. So, around 5 lakh people appear in the exam, and 5 lakh is a large number. So whenever you take a large number of people and you draw their IQ curve, then that curve may be bell-shaped curve maybe. So right now there are a large number of people who are there in this one. Now out of these people, the people who are least in IQ, then they will go to that level and they will do their job at that level, maybe clerk. People who are slightly better in IQ, they will go to the second level job. Further better in the IQ, well, third level job. And the people who are highest IQ among all these 5 lakh people, they might clear the UPSC exam and become an IAS officer. So at this point, if your IQ is high, right now, for example, for you people, if your IQ is high, then, well, you have an advantage. Because today you are competing even with those people who may ultimately turn out to become a clerk, who might never clear the UPSC. He might become a clerk, they might become a middle level officer or something like this one. So you are competing with them also. So today IQ will give an advantage for you. Today IQ will be very important for you. But suppose, for example, once you clear the UPSC exam and start working as an IAS officer, then after, who will be your competitors? Would you be competing still with those people who are low in IQ, who are clerk, for example? Well, of course not. So after that, you are not going to compete with the clerk, not with this. Then after, your competitor will be only other IAS officer who are as intelligent as you are. So right now you are competing even with those people who are less intelligent. So it is advantage for you. But once you clear the UPSC exam and start working as an IAS officer, then you are going to going to compete only with those IAS officers who are, well, higher in IQ, as high as you are. So after that, IQ will not give you any advantage. So after that, so till this point, when you start your career, IQ is important. But after you start your career and stop preparing for the exam, since then after that, IQ will not play much role. So it is something like, normally we say here that if you look at role of IQ, according to Daniel Goleman further, let's talk about, this is the increment and that is the age. Then IQ, as I told you earlier also, that IQ keeps on increasing till say 18 years of age. Till 18 years of age, IQ is important because keeps on increasing. IQ keeps on increasing. After that, it remains same throughout the life. So according to our research, after 18 years of age, IQ does not change much. It remains more or less same throughout the life. And according to Daniel Goleman, IQ remains important till 25 years of age. IQ plays an important role till 25 years of age. In India, it might be even 32 years of age. Why so? Well, maximum age limit of UPSC exam. The idea is that till the time you are preparing for an exam, IQ is important. And once you stop preparing and start working, IQ will no longer play a role. So this is what we have found. That is why we say that IQ is a minimum condition of success, a necessary condition of success, but not the sufficient one. What does that mean? It simply means that if your IQ is high, if your IQ is low, then you may not succeed. That may be guaranteed. But if you, just because, so it is a minimum condition. But just because your IQ is high does not mean that you will become successful. You can still fail. So IQ is a minimum condition, a necessary condition, but not the sufficient condition. It is something like oxygen. Oxygen is the minimum condition of life, but not the sufficient condition. So if the oxygen is not there, we will not live. But just because oxygen is there does not mean that we will live. A dead person, if you give oxygen to that person, does not mean that he will become alive. So oxygen, without oxygen we will die, but with oxygen there is no guarantee that we will survive. It is not the sufficient condition of life. Similarly, IQ is also like that, minimum condition of our success but not the sufficient condition. According to Daniel Goleman, the role of IQ in our success is not more than 20%. Role of IQ in our success is not more than 20%. That is what he claimed. Remember how drastic this proposition is, because earlier people thought, as I told you earlier, that you can say earlier it was thought that 100% it is IQ that makes us successful. But now Goleman said no, not 100%, only 20%. Role of IQ in our success in life is not more than 20%, or well, it is only, you can say IQ contributes only 20%, or only 20% of our success in life can be attributed to IQ. That is the role of IQ. That less is the role of IQ. Rationality. Now, it was so startling for many people that this data that he proposed in that book, 20% is IQ, it became the cover page of Time magazine in next year. You know, Time magazine cover page, the most important news, most startling news is often published at the cover page of the Time magazine. Now, it became the cover page of the Time magazine on that year that IQ is only 20%. So that has created lots of controversy and debate in the world. Is IQ that less important? So this is what this theory essentially tells us. Now, if IQ contributes only 20% of our success, then what are the can say rest 80% of the success is because of what? What leads to the 80% of our success rest? Well, we'll talk about that. Next, second one is called expertise. Second one is called expertise. Write down further. Expertise is the store of, it is the store of knowledge, store collection. It is a store of knowledge and practical skill. It is a store of knowledge and practical skill that we acquire through practice and experience. It is a store of knowledge and practical skill that we acquire through practice and experience. That we acquire through practice and experience. So, after IQ, what we need in order to be successful is the expertise. So, after IQ, suppose you have very high IQ, then after you have to study hard, you have to learn, you have to sit in a classroom, you have to learn the rules of administration. Suppose after you clear the exam, then after you have to learn the rules of administration, you have to learn the expertise of how to run the administration and all. So, that knowledge that you acquire how to do the job is called expertise. It is a store of knowledge, practical skill, etc. How do you can say achieve the goal that is given to you as a professional? That is what we call the expertise. Now, what is the role and limitation of expertise? Write down further. Expertise allows us to do a job. Expertise allows us to do a job, but how well we do it, is not determined by expertise. But how well we do it is not determined by expertise. So, this is the role and limitation of expertise. So, first of all, expertise allows you to do job, because only through the expertise you can actually do the job. If there is no expertise, well, you will never be able to do the job. But how well we do it is not determined by expertise. What I mean here is something like this one. Suppose, for example, there are two officers are there, say A and B. Suppose he is the best officer and suppose he is the worst officer. Best officer and the worst officer. Now, if you check their IQ, then you might find that their IQ may be equal. Both of them have cleared the same UPSC exam. If you measure their expertise, then that might also be equal, because even the worst officer do the job. Whatever job is given to them, assigned to them, they complete that, they do that. So, they also do their job, but then also he is the best and he is the worst. So, expertise allow you to do the job, but how well you do it is not determined by the expertise. Expertise is something that is determined by something else. Thus, write down further. Thus, expertise is also a minimum condition of success. Thus, expertise is also a minimum condition of success. Minimum condition of success, not the sufficient one. Expertise is also a minimum condition of success, not the minimum and necessary condition. Expertise is also minimum and necessary condition of success, but not the sufficient one. So, this is what Goldman has found in this case. The idea here is that like IQ, expertise is also a minimum condition. Without expertise, nobody can succeed. But just because somebody is expert does not mean that he will necessarily succeed. No, it is not a guarantee of your success. It is also a baseline condition. According to Daniel Goleman, the role of expertise in our success is as much as IQ. So, 20% of our success may be attributed to IQ and 20% of our success may be possibly attributed to expertise. This is what Daniel Goleman has found in his work. Now, that also leaves almost 60% of our success to the non-rational factor. Both of them are rational factors. So, think of it, only 40% of our success in life may be attributed to rationality, which earlier thinkers thought rationality alone makes you successful. So, 60% of our success may be because of non-rational factor. What are they? Well, that is emotional intelligence. That is emotional intelligence. So, here we can define the emotional intelligence the way we have defined earlier. After definition, write down further. If a person has a certain high IQ and expertise, then a high emotional intelligence will almost guarantees his success in almost any profession. High emotional intelligence guarantees his success in almost any profession. It is the sufficient condition of success. It is the sufficient condition of success. So, this is what these people have found. If a person has a certain high IQ, certain high expertise, then after, if there is an emotional intelligence, then that will guarantee that this person will definitely succeed in his life. So, for example, if you take these two people, best and worst officer, they may have equal IQ, they may have equal expertise, but if you measure their emotional intelligence, then he will be very high in emotional intelligence and that person may be very low in emotional intelligence. And when I say emotional intelligence, then remember we mean those 25 competences. So, this person may be high in self-confidence, self-control, trustworthiness, adaptability, innovation, commitment, optimism, initiative, empathy, leadership, etc., etc. So, what makes us successful in our life is not necessarily the IQ or expertise. What makes us successful in our life are those competencies that I talked about. It is not only a theoretical thing, just take the common sense knowledge. Think of it, anybody who is successful in his world, take the case of Bill Gates. Bill Gates can be considered as one of the most successful person in the recent times. Well, do you think that Bill Gates, when he succeeded, became the richest person in the world, then do you think that he was the most intelligent person in terms of IQ also in the world? Of course not. Forget about the world. Even in Microsoft, do you think that he must be the most intelligent person in the Microsoft? There is no guarantee for that. So there is no guarantee for that. Well, of course he is intelligent. We are not doubting his intelligence, but there is no guarantee that he is the most intelligent person. There may be other persons in the Microsoft who may be as intelligent as he is. So that may be the case, but even then he succeeded. He succeeded not because of his IQ, remember, not because of his expertise. He succeeded because of his emotion. He must be high in leadership, innovation, initiative, empathy, self-control. So these are the things that might have made him successful as a person. Take the case of Dhirubhai Ambani. He might be considered as one of the most successful person in the business world in India, the last 50 years maybe. Now, do you think that he was the most intelligent person also in India? Of course not. So he was not even an educated person. I was told that he worked as a petrol boy in Qatar at one point of time. From there he started the largest business empire in the modern India. So it was not because of his IQ or expertise, it was because of his emotional, his leadership ability, his networking ability, his bond, well, political awareness. These are the things that made him successful. So according to Daniel Goleman, the role of emotional intelligence in our success may be at least 60%. And in some people, the role of emotional intelligence can be as high as 91%. As high as 91%. This is what we have found there. So that is the role of, I can say, emotional intelligence in our success. So if you compare finally the three things, then IQ is something that allows us to get a job. Expertise allows us to retain a job. And emotional intelligence allows us to become the best in the job. So success in life is not about getting a job, not about retaining a job, but about being the best in the job, which emotional intelligence guarantees. So that is the role of emotional intelligence in our personal life success. So that is the first important thing. Before we go to the second one, let's take some questions I think are there. Sir, veteran politicians are of high intelligence quotient person, Anil Kumar Rai. No, Anil Kumar Rai, we believe that veteran politicians may be more emotionally intelligent rather than IQ. IQ bureaucrats need to have. Politician does not have to have IQ. Politicians can be less intelligent also, but they have to have emotional intelligence in the sense of social skill, etc. Sir, is there any link between IQ and hard work, Sunanda? Not much, Sunanda. There is not. Hard work is more about emotional intelligence than IQ. We will see that in later class. Perseverance or self-control, etc. That is a part of the hard work. So hard work is more emotional intelligence rather than IQ. Next question, Suman. Sir, when someone first time select an IRS and the next year same person becomes IAS, so does his IQ increase during this between? No. As I told you that almost all of those people who are near to clearing exam, they are more or less equal in IQ. Then after expertise matters, or we can say a little random factors. No, IQ does not increase in a year. Next question, Subham. Sir, can kindness be an emotional intelligence in emotional competence? Yes, kindness is more closer to, you can say, empathy, you can see. Kindness may be a type of empathy, as I told you earlier, this one. So kindness will be a component of that empathy. We will see that in later class. But yes, it is a part of emotional intelligence. So that is the first important thing. The second important role of emotional intelligence we will talk about next. Write down further. Write down second one. Its role of emotional intelligence in economic success of an organization. Role of emotional intelligence in the economic success of an organization. So till now we were talking about emotional intelligence and the individual success. Suppose for example, we say here that if you want to be successful in your life, then work upon your emotional intelligence. If I want to succeed in my life, then I should work upon my emotional intelligence. But should your employer also think about your emotional intelligence? That is the next important thing that we have. So you have seen that emotional intelligence leads to the economic success of the organization. What do we mean by economic success? So economic success basically means profit, it means productivity, however you measure it, or it might mean efficiency, etc. So these are the profit in private organizations, otherwise it can be productivity, efficiency, etc. however else you measure it. That also is found to be influenced by the emotional intelligence. But before we understand that, let us take about research. One of the very important research conducted in this area, I will try to refer that. Now, there was research conducted in which the researchers, psychologists in that case, well, they studied more than 180 big organizations in the world. And in that study, one part of that study was this, what we are going to talk about. So, in that study, what they did, that they try to first of all, try to find out that how much each employee in the office contributes to the profit of the organization. Suppose for example, think of it. Suppose for example, I am working in an organization, then of course I take something from the organization, salary, perks, benefit, etc. But along with taking from the organization, I work for this organization, and by working for this organization, I contribute to the total profit of the organization as well. So what is my contribution to the profit, and how much is my take away from the organization? This is what they compared. Every organization keeps a track on that. So if my contribution is more than what I take from the organization, then I am a good employee. But if I take more from the organization than I give to my organization, then I am a bad employee. So they try to find out, well, how much each employee contributes to the total profit of the organization. And they made that comparison, well, first of all, at the lowest level. People working at the lowest level of the organization, like for example, clerks, or you can say the clerks or the DTP operators, people who do the repetitive job, same job every day in their life. And they compared that 1% best performer, top performer, people who maximum contributed to the profit, 1% most best one, and 1% bottom. And they found that 1% top performer contributed to the total profit of the organization, that was around 3 times more than 1% bottom. So 1% best clerk contributed to the profit of the organization, that was 3 times more than 1% bottom clerks. And remember, difference between top and bottom is not because of IQ and expertise, but it is because of the emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence at the lowest level increases the profit of the organization at that level by 3 times. That is the one thing they found. Second thing is that they made a similar comparison at the middle level. When they compared 1% top performer and 1% bottom performer. And they found that 1% top performer contributed around 12 times more to the profit of the organization than 1% bottom. So that was the contribution of emotional intelligence. Again, top and bottom differs by emotional intelligence. 12 times was found the difference at that level. And then after, they made a slightly different comparison at the top level of the organization. The CEO of the company, so they were the clerk and DTP operators, they were the sales supervisor, or you can say the middle level managers and all, and they were the top managers, CEO of the company, IAS officer in civil service, etc. And they made a slightly different comparison, 1% top performer and 1% average performer. And they found that 1% top performer contributed to the profit of the organization, that was, well, 127 times than 1% average, not the bottom. Had it been a bottom, then it might be 300 times maybe. So 1% top performer, best performer as a CEO, as a senior manager, contributed 127 times more to the profit of the organization than 1% average. That was the role of emotional intelligence that these people found. And it is not only research, you can see that in a general day-to-day life also. You see, just look at the economic newspaper. You see that in many big organization, one bad CEO comes up and the organization closes down. And one good CEO comes and there is a turnaround in the organization. Does that not happen? Take many examples. Suppose, for example, some examples I remember. Take the case of Nokia. So at one point of time, Nokia was the market leader in the mobile. So that who has not used that mobile of Nokia 3310, 3315 or 1100? It was such a strong mobile, sturdy mobile that you throw that mobile on the ground, it will break in 5 parts and you reassemble that and it will still be working. So that strong and powerful mobile Nokia used to make, and within a few years Nokia had to close down in India. So they failed again. Now, was that a failure of a clerk? Was that a failure of a DTP operator? Of course not. It was the failure of the senior manager. So when a senior manager fails, the whole organization fails. At one point of time, well, Kodak was one of the largest 50 companies in the world. And within a few years, well, they had within 10 years of that high level of position, success and all, Kodak had to file for bankruptcy. Was that a failure of a clerk? Was that a failure of salesman? No, that was a failure of the CEO or failure of the senior managers. So as we go up, then the impact of your failure becomes higher and higher. And so as we grow up in the organizational hierarchy, well, role of emotional intelligence becomes bigger and bigger. This is what we have found in our research here. So write on further. It is found that the presence of emotionally intelligent people, it is found that the presence of emotionally intelligent people increases the profit of the organization, Though, write down further, though it is important at all the levels of the organization, but its importance increases as we move up in the organizational hierarchy. And it plays the most important role at the top of the organization. And it plays the most important role at the top of the organization. And it plays the most important role at the top of the organization. So this is what we have found here. So role of emotional intelligence, actually it increases the profit of the organization. It plays an important role at every stage, but of course lowest also. But as we rise up in the hierarchy of the organization, emotional intelligence becomes more important and becomes the most important at the top. So the idea here is that we can afford to have emotionally less intelligent clerk, but you cannot afford to have emotionally less intelligent, well, CEO of the company, because if you have that, then your company will close down. You can afford to have emotionally less intelligent lower bureaucracy, but you cannot have emotionally less intelligent IAS officer, because that will have a serious consequence for the whole of bureaucracy, government and the public. So that is the role and importance of emotional intelligence in the professional life of an organization. Now these people have extended the same argument to the level of the whole country also, nation also. Suppose for example, there are two countries, say A and B. Both of them are similar in every aspect, same size, same culture, similar population, similar, you can say, natural resource, background, everything more or less similar. Only difference between them is that this country has, well, its workforce of that country, people between the age of 15 to 59, that's called workforce. Workforce of that country has much higher emotional intelligence, and workforce of this country has much lower emotional intelligence. Then because of this one single difference, we can make a very reliable prediction that this country is going to have much higher GDP growth in the next quarter, next year, next few years and all, than this country. So this is the important. So emotional intelligence is not only important for our personal life, not only our professional life, not only for our organization, but for whole country as well. So if the workforce of the emotional intelligence has been found to have a direct impact on the GDP growth of the country as well. So that is what we have found in that case again. That's why we say here that, and this is an interesting conclusion that Daniel Goleman had drawn in his book. He had said that generation of Americans, think of it, generation of Americans who have entered into the workforce in America, generation of Americans who have been brought up in emotionally less intelligent environment, they are entering into the workforce in the decade of 1990s. He has found that generation of Americans who have been brought up in emotionally less intelligent environment, they are going to enter the workforce in the decade of 1990s. I might possibly say that generation of Indian who are brought up in emotionally less intelligent environment, they are going to enter the workforce in the decade of 2020s. 2020s. So this decade in India, so he said further, I am going to his quotation, he said further that now is the time when American government must think about the emotional intelligence. American organizations must think about the emotional intelligence of their workforce. Because if they do not think about the intelligence of the workforce, then it may have serious consequence for the profit of the organization and GDP of the country. In India, we will say that now is the time when Indian organizations and the Indian government, they must think about the emotional intelligence of their workforce. Because those children today who are brought up in quota, for example, are brought up in emotionally less intelligent environment, tomorrow they will become workforce. And if they are not emotional intelligence, then it will have some direct impact on the profit of the organization and the GDP of the country. So now is the time when we have to think about emotional intelligence. There can be some question on that also. Why is it that emotional intelligence has become more important today than it earlier was? This is one of the reasons. That earlier emotional intelligence was already there. Now it is not there. So these children who are brought up in emotionally less intelligent environment, they will become workforce in the next decade. And if their emotional intelligence is not increased, then it will have a serious consequence for the profit and GDP of the country, profit of the organization and GDP of the country. So that is the second important implication of importance of role of emotional intelligence. So starting from personal life to the GDP of the country, economy of the country, at every stage, emotional intelligence plays an important role. That is what we have found here in our research. Let's take, if there is any question. No, there is no question. So next important thing that we will talk. So these are some of the introductory idea. Now next important things that we will talk about next now is some introductory ideas, further preliminary ideas, which I believe is important for us to know in order to understand the whole idea of emotional intelligence. So first important topic in this section that we will talk about is emotions. So emotions are the first important thing that we will talk about. So because since the beginning we have been talking about emotions and all. What is the meaning of emotion? Because if you look at the term emotion, then people often have a very confused notion about emotion. We all often consider emotion as a very complicated thing, very mysterious thing, very messy thing, maybe very difficult to understand, make sense of. So we often have very vague awareness, vague knowledge of what exactly emotions are. But we in our study here cannot have that vague notion. We must have a clear-cut understanding of what exactly we mean by emotions. So let us see what exactly, how can we understand emotion? What is the meaning of emotion for us in this topic that we are discussing? So first of all, write down a sort of technical definition of emotion. Normally I give you non-technical, but now I will give you a technical definition of emotion. Write down a few lines. Emotions are the brief episode of synchronized responses, brief episode of synchronized responses, brief episode of synchronized responses involving facial expressions, comma, involving facial expressions, comma, physiological changes and their subjective evaluation which indicates the evaluation of an external or internal event, as significant. I repeat the whole thing, you can revise that once again. Emotions are the brief episode of synchronized responses involving facial expression, physiological changes and their subjective evaluation, which indicates the evaluation of an external or internal event as significant. So that is how we can define emotion. It is a very technical definition of emotion. I am sure that you have not understood a word of it. But you don't have to bother about that. You don't have to cram this definition. Nobody will ask you the question that would define emotion as such. But nevertheless, I made you to write this definition because this definition involves everything that we mean by emotion. Let us see what are those everything. So write down further. Thus, emotions involve the following. First one, they are brief in duration. So that is the first important thing that we need to remember about emotion. Emotions are always brief, short in duration. They are always temporary. Emotions are never permanent. It is something like this. Suppose for example, this is time and you are normal. At this point suddenly something happens, your emotion will there. And after some time, well, again you become normal. It is during this period that emotions remain. And during this period, as we will see in the second and third point, they do something very important for us. So every emotion in a way has a time period associated with that. If the emotion exceeds the time period, then that becomes a sign of problem. Suppose for example, there is a person, suppose you are happy, then you laugh and after some time you become normal. Let's imagine a person who keeps on laughing the whole day. What do we call that person? Well, a mad person. So we in psychology we call that as mania. So such people suffer from mania, that person must consult a psychologist. Similarly, suppose you are sad, then depending on what makes you sad, we'll talk about what makes us sad in the next topic. So depending on what makes you sad, your sadness may be for a few hours, for a few days or a few You can say, so depending on what makes you sad. If you sad because you lost 500 rupees, you will be sad for a day. If you are sad because you lost your mobile phone, maybe 2-3 days. If you are sad because you lost an opportunity like an examination, you may be sad for 10-15 days. If you are sad because, well, there is a breakup in a relationship or something like this one, well, then that sadness may go for 15-20 day a month also. And if somebody is sad because somebody has died in a family, then that sadness also may go for a month or so. But imagine a person who is sad continuously for 6 months, then that is a clear sign of depression. Depression is one of the worst killer of, one of the most important cause of unnatural death in the world today. So idea is that any emotion, when it exceeds the time period, that becomes a sign of disturbance. That person must consult a psychologist. But good thing is that we all are able to keep our emotions within the stipulated time. That's why we are normal people. But remember, always emotions always have a time period. That's why it is often said that never make the permanent decisions of your life on the basis of emotions which are temporary. So, because emotions will go away after some time, but well, you can say its impact will remain there if you make permanent decisions on that basis. That's why I never make a permanent decision of a life on the basis of emotions, which are temporary. That is the first important thing that you need to remember about emotion. Second important thing is, write down further, they are always triggered by some triggering events. They are always triggered by some triggering events which can be external, which may be external or internal. They are always triggered by some triggering events which can be external or internal. So that is the second important thing. The idea here is that emotions do not occur in vacuum. Whenever emotion happens, it is always a response to some change happening around her. In a way, you can say any change that happens around us triggers an emotion. We call it triggers an emotion. And that event which triggers an emotion in us, we call that as triggering event. So every emotion has a triggering event. It may be external sometimes, it may be internal also. Suppose for example, if you are laughing, then there must have something happen around you that makes you to laugh. Somebody might have said a joke to you, you might have observed something which appears to be funny, or you might have external, or you may remember something that is funny, maybe internal. Either way you become happy or you start laughing. So that is a triggering event, externally sometimes or internal. But suppose for example a person keeps on laughing without a triggering event, what do we call that person? Again, a mad person. So well, any emotion without triggering event it happens in us, then that becomes a sign of some mental disturbance maybe. So idea here is that every emotion has a triggering event. So remember a few important things. First of all, emotions are always our response, natural response towards the events happening around us. That's why we often say emotions always express our relationship with the world. Emotions are our engagement with the world. Through the emotions, we actually engage with the world. We try to relate with the world how it is. This is the difference between emotions and reason. Reason makes us free, autonomy. Emotions makes us bound, engaged, and we live a world in the world, not as an autonomous, we can say, entity in a way. So emotions play a much bigger role in our life, as we will see shortly. So emotions allow us to engage with the world, to express our relationship with the world, to be in the situation. That is one way to understand emotion further. Second important thing. Third one, write down. Emotions always evaluate their triggering event. They always evaluate their triggering event, and through that they indicate their significance. They always evaluate their triggering event and through that indicate their significance. So that is the next important thing. Emotions are always evaluative by nature. So they always evaluate that what event has triggered an emotion in us, what is the meaning of that event. That event is good, bad or whatever. So it always evaluates, and through that evaluation it tells us how significant those events are for us. Let us talk about some nature of emotion in that sense. You know, we often talk about some primary emotion or basic emotions. Primary emotion. You know, earlier it was assumed that we as a human being have a large number of emotions, uncountable number of emotions perhaps. There was a psychologist, a very patient person, he did a very interesting research. He studied the whole of English Oxford English Dictionary and he found that there are at least 512 words are there in the English language which directly connote some emotion. So at least in English language there are 1000 others are which have some emotional connotation. So according to him there are at least 512 emotions are there in the English language. So we often think that there are large number of emotions are there. Now, but it was Charles Darwin for the first time who made a proposal that no, there are a very small number of primary emotions. Just as in the case of light, for example, well, there are only 3 primary colors are there, which combine together to create a millions of colors. A normal human eye can recognize at least 2.5 million colors. But all these 2.5 million colors that our eyes can recognize, well, are made up of only 3 primary colors, red, blue and green. Similarly, you can say in emotions also he proposed, Charles Darwin, that there are only a small number of primary emotions are there which might have played a very important role in our survival in the evolutionary period. Then after he called them my primary emotions like primary colors in the light. Now then after a number of research has been conducted that where people have tried to identify what are these primary emotions, and today the most accepted classification was given by a psychologist called Paul Ekman and his daughter Eva Ekman. So they are the two people. Paul Ekman himself had done very large number of research throughout the world, and on the basis of all that research he has conducted, he had found that there are 6 primary emotions that we have. They are like colors of human life. There are 6 primary emotions are there which we as a human being are capable of understanding. Let's briefly talk about these primary emotions today. First primary emotion is the happiness. Now happiness is that emotion which tells us that there is something good around us. Something good around us, something beneficial for something that is beneficial for our survival, our well-being, our flourishing. So when we find something that benefits us in a way that is beneficial for our evolutionary survival maybe, well, then normally we become happy. Happiness is also that emotion which allows us to socially connect with the things and people who make us happy. It has a social function in that sense also. Now, second emotion that we have primary is of course sadness. Now, sadness is that emotion which indicates to us about the loss of something. So, whenever we lose something, then we normally become sad. That loss can be loss of a physical object like a mobile, loss of an opportunity like an exam, loss of a relationship like a breakup or divorce, or loss of a person like somebody dies. But whenever we lose something, then we often become sad. So sadness is indication of loss, losing something which was important for us, losing something that was valuable for us. Not only that, sadness allows us to reflect about that loss. To reflect about that loss, to think about that loss, that something which was so important that was lost, then well, what is the meaning of that loss? What is the meaning of life after that? How to handle this situation of loss? So it allows us to indicate the loss. Because of that, you can say it is related to lots of reflection, thinking, etc. That is why we often say that sadness is that emotion which is very closely related to philosophy. Under sadness, we become more philosophical. That what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? how to live this life, why to live this life. So these are the philosophical questions that arise in us, particularly when we are sad. So sadness is a very important emotion. Not only philosophy, sometimes sadness spurs artistic activity also. In sadness, we become more poetic also, we become more musical also. You know, there was a song that I long ago has heard, that best songs are sung with a broken heart. So sad songs are the most beautiful songs normally, because in that case we understand much deeper meaning and purpose of life. So sadness makes us more philosophical, makes us more, you can say, musical, more poetic. It is about reflection, thinking, understanding, etc. Not only that, sadness also allows us to adapt to that loss. Because something so important has been lost now, then how to live our life without that? Life must go on. So however important that thing was which is lost, but we must proceed further in the life. So sadness allows us to adjust with that loss, to adapt to that loss, that how to live our life without something which was so important, that is no longer with us. So it has a very important adaptive function. That is the importance of sadness further. Not only that, sadness, when it is shared, shared sadness always increases, strengthens our relationships. Shared sadness always strengthens our relationship, it cements our relationship. So sadness has a very strong social function as well. In sadness, we become closer to each other. You must have heard, there is a beautiful dialogue in that film, Three Idiots. I hope all of you may have seen that film. There is a dialogue in that film that when a friend fails, then you become sad. But when your friend tops, then you become even more sad. Now, that is a very beautiful insight about the human nature. When your friend fails, then you are sad, of course. But at least there is one silver line, is that perhaps you will become closer to each other now. You share your sadness. But suppose your friend tops and you fail. Now that will create. So in this case, well, your friend will never not be able to share your sadness. That sharing, even if he does, well, it will be very shallow sharing. It will not be that strong in that case. So that will create a gulf between you and your friend. So when you fail together, then you must have seen, for example, two friends, for example, when they fail together, they often become better friends. So sadness often brings people closer to each other. So that's why we often say that that person is your closest friend on whose shoulders you can cry. What is meaning of the term crying on the shoulder of someone? It means that that person can share your sadness. So if you can share your sadness with somebody, it has two important things to understand. First of all, if you share your sadness with somebody, then that actually means that, well, that person is a very close friend of yours. But more importantly, every time when you share your sadness, you will become closer still. Shared sadness often brings us closure. That is why you see in every culture, well, we have a system of shared sadness. Whenever somebody dies in our family, the whole society comes to us to share our sadness. It creates a community feeling. It creates a bonding between the people. So sadness plays a very important role in our life. So next time when you become sad, don't be sad. Don't be so sad that you are sad. So even if you have lost something, sadness will perhaps do something for you. It can possibly give you something that otherwise you may never have got. So sadness plays a very important role in our life. Second thing, third emotion is the fear. Now fear is that emotion which tells us that around us there is a threat to our survival, some danger. Something which is threatening to our survival, our well-being, our flourishing. So that is what, not only that, fear, as we will see in many later classes, that fear also motivates us to keep ourselves away from the threat. So it tells us that there is a threat and how to keep yourself away from that. So in a way we can see fear is that emotion which keeps on telling us that world is a dangerous place. Please take care of yourself. So it allows us to take care of ourselves. It allows us to, keep us safe in our threatening. Well, world is threatening, that is a fact. World is dangerous, that is a fact. How to save ourselves? Person who has no fear will never be able to survive. Think of it. Suppose you are running, suddenly you reach a cliff, suddenly you will be startled and stop there. A person because of the fear. Now suppose the fear of height, fear of cliff. Suppose there is a person who is not that afraid, he might jump out of the cliff and he might be gone. So fear allows us to keep away from dangerous things like a snake, like a tiger, like a, can say the lion, like a cliff, like a deep water, like boss, whatever. Not only that, moderate fear often is found to increase our creativity. Moderate fear increases our creativity. So that is another interesting thing. So in fear, of course, fear is an indication of a danger around us. So if there is a danger around us, if there is a threat around us, then well, you have to find a way out of that threat. And this attempt to find a way out of your threat is, well, something that is called creativity. So creativity is often spurred by the fear. We become more creative. Tell me one thing. During your college days, for example, which month of the year or which week of the year or which day of the year was the most productive as far as your study was concerned? Perhaps all of you will say the same answer, the one before the exam. Now, the moment as examination approaches, we become more productive in our work. Why so? Fear of the examination clears that. So when examination comes closer, then we become more creative. We know how to, we start finding out a way how to learn well, how to remember well, how to write well, how to cheat well. Well, that is also creativity. So we become more creative. Some students say that in the night before the examination was the most productive night of the whole year. That in one night we study more than perhaps months in the beginning of the year. So examination, fear of the examination creates that pressure on us that ultimately creates our creativity. Fear is very closely related to creativity, which we will discuss in some later class also. Third emotion. Fourth one is the anger. Anger is the emotion which indicates to us that there is something wrong which has happened around us. Something wrong, something unjustified, something frustrating, some obstacle in the achievement of our justified goal. So when somebody does something wrong to us, then we normally become angry in that situation. So that is what anger is, and anger also motivates us to correct that wrong, fight the wrong, or you can say improve the, well, better the wrong. Because of that, since anger is related to the wrong, so anger is a very strong emotion that is related to the morality. Because morality is all about understanding the right and wrong, we will see the role of anger in morality in a later class. That is the fourth one. Fifth one is called disgust. Now, disgust is that emotion which tells us there is something bad in taste or smell. Something bad in taste or smell. So in this sense, we can see that disgust is most biological of all these emotions. It is more related to taste in the mouth and smell in the, well, nose. That is why you can say that even today, what is the facial expression of the disgust? The moment you have something like this one, mouth opens, tongue is out and nose is, well, constricted. So by constricting your nose, we stop smelling the poisonous thing, and taste means by opening the mouth and keeping the tongue out, we try to spit out the poisonous thing that has gone inside us. Something which is bad in taste may be poisonous, and that may harm our biological well-being. So sometimes in disgust we vomit also. So if some poisonous thing has gone inside our body, then we expel it out by vomiting it, by spitting it, by closing our nose, something like this. So disgust is that emotion that keeps us biologically safe from the things which can possibly be dangerous for us, our survival and all. So before we can say fear came into being, disgust was that emotion that kept us biologically safe. Safe from the poisonous things around us, safe from things that are biologically harmful for us. It is this disgust, that later on perhaps might be the basis of many bad cultural practices like untouchability, racism, etc. That is also we can think of. And then finally, sixth one is called surprise. Surprise is that emotion which tells us that there is something new and unexpected. Something new and unexpected has happened around us. So that is what is the purpose of surprise. Not only that, surprise also allows us to allocate our attention. To allocate our attention from the old thing to the new thing. It is attention allocating emotion. Attention managing emotion, attention, well, can say regulating emotion. Because something that was old that we were attending earlier, that is known, but new things happening around us can be dangerous also, can be good also. So surprise allows us to take care of, well, attend to the new things around you, ignoring the older things. It is about the attentional allocation. So these are the 6 primary emotions, and well, these are the things that yesterday I told you, or maybe in the beginning of this class today itself, I told you that can say emotions have an information in themselves. Emotions are storehouse of that information. Every emotion gives us some important information about the nature of the world. So these are the information that emotions give to us, that whether the world is good, something missing, or dangerous, threatening, or wrong, or bad in taste, or new, or unexpected, etc. This is what is the meaning of that point that we have talked about, that they evaluate, and through that evaluation they indicate the significance of those things. That is what emotions actually do for. Because of that, we often say that emotions have a very strong survival function. Emotions might have played the most important role in our survival during the evolutionary period. So much more than our rationality. So these are the significance that we have been talking about the emotion. There is a fourth one also, but before that let us take some questions if there is. What are the provisions taken by the UPSC to check the drawbacks or less emotional intelligence candidate, as it is the most important part of the bureaucracy? This is what you have to study. You are studying right now. So they have tried to help you to understand emotional intelligence first of all. Training will be given to you later. How to control anger, Biswajit. Biswajit will talk about that in the self-regulation class later. Nimai, what is the difference between facial expression and body language? We will also talk about that later, tomorrow's class maybe. So how phobia is related to emotions? We will talk about that also later, tomorrow's class. Nimai. Suman, whose person have high IQ? Those who have many questions or no one unable to question anytime. People who have many questions, they are more perhaps in IQ, maybe. So that is it for today. Tomorrow we'll talk the fourth important part of the thing here. So that's it for today.